All right, it is that time again, or for this week. So, hello! Welcome to this week's Tales from Afar. Last week we were also in St. Petersburg, but we were kind of going around the city, looking at the churches, looking at some of the pretty sights from the canals, etc. Kind of getting a feel for the place. This week, we are going to be spending all of our time in one building, in the Winter Palace of the Hermitage. And so there was confusion about this, even, in our tour group in St. Petersburg. People would be asking, are we in the Winter Palace or are we in the Hermitage? So, the Winter Palace, which was the official dwelling place of the Russian royal family for almost two centuries, is one building of the cluster of buildings that now comprise the Hermitage Museum. And the Hermitage is on the scale of the Louvre, really, with just how much there is in it. My husband, who we were traveling together, we were on this trip together, had been to St. Petersburg previously, several years ago, and said he spent 2 or 3 full days in the Hermitage. It's that big. We had a morning. So, clearly, we're not going to see everything. We're not even going to see most of the pictures I took. I have filed a lot of them as I was going through, picking out pictures for this stream. I ended up filing a lot of pictures in the Centaur Spotting in the Wild folder, and also creating some story-specific folders for when I might want to tell y'all about the story of Ganymede with pictures for show and tell. Or one of these days I will tell you the story of Persephone at some length and in detail. And so I saved some pictures for that. But there was so much, and I cannot show it all to you. But what we are going to look at, one of the things that my spouse commented on when he was about his previous trip was that, the art they store there is great, it's fine, whatever, but the place itself, you'll just be walking along and all of a sudden off to the side there's this gorgeous, amazing inlaid table, or you'll enter a room and you'll look up and the ceiling's covered in art. It's a really opulent, really impressive building, even apart from what's hung on its walls or the sculptures displayed in it. So a lot of today, we're going to be looking at the interiors of the Hermitage, because he's right. He's occasionally right. They are interesting. They are interesting and they are impressive. So we'll be looking at that along with some of the particular pieces in the Hermitage. As I was saying, this is the Winter Palace, one of the buildings that comprise the Hermitage. We talked last week a little bit about the tendency in St. Petersburg to use bright pastel colors. It's a little bit hard to tell because this is shadowed, but this is in fact like a mint green building with gold trim and white columns. Very much in the St. Petersburg is a city of pastel buildings line. And the Winter Palace was constructed originally in 1730s. So, working towards being 300 years old. Yeah. And it housed the Russian royal family from 1732 to 1917, when the Russian royal family was no more. So this is the exterior, the main entrance, the main facade. We're doing things a little out of order here. This was the view when we exited. We were leaving the museum. And the Winter Palace is built around a courtyard. So this is a view into the courtyard. You can see a little bit clearer here the minty green color and the some of the details, as well as these random statues up on the roof. We couldn't tell what they were. And then just to make sure you get all angles of the Hermitage, here's a side view. Off to the left side of the picture, out of frame, are, well, you can see one of the kiosks, but there were other kiosks lined up along this street selling hot mulled wine, selling snacks. We didn't buy any. We didn't have any Russian money. So like I said last week, because we didn't have visas, we couldn't do anything that wasn't an official tour. So we didn't really have the opportunity to get Russian money or run around on our own. And that's okay. We had a really good time. But we definitely didn't get to try any of the local cuisine or anything like that. But so this is your side view of the Hermitage, and bonus tourist area mascots. I was not expecting to see a Chippendale Rescue Rangers suited character in St. Petersburg, and yet here we are. That's a thing. And one of the many reasons I love my spouse and my friends, because when my spouse and I came up upon this view, he said, "Huh, I didn't know there were furries in St. Petersburg." And many of my friends echoed that same sentiment, but worldwide apparently. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the exterior of the Winter Palace. Looks like outside. Moving inside. So just like, this is the main staircase from the main entrance. You walk in the main entrance, you go past the ticket takers, you put your bags away at a booth, and then you're confronted with this staircase, this double staircase that branches off, goes up and around, and meets up right up here with the columns. And this kind of sets the tone, and we begin as we mean to go on. Starts off super opulent, remains super opulent. I think these columns are just granite. They might be marble, I don't know. But everywhere, and this will be apparent, was just everything's bigger in Russia. When the Russians build a palace, they build a palace, pulling out all the stops. So the same rule about going to cool old churches applies when you're in the Hermitage. In pretty much any room you're in, be sure to look down and be sure to look up, as well as around, because there are things like this. This is the ceiling of that entryway. This painting of, I think this is the various Olympian gods, because I see a trident in there. I see things with wings, but also things without wings. I think this is a classical piece rather than a Christian piece. But it's just up there on the ceiling. No commentary, no little plaque about it. It's just part of the room, not an exhibit. Just part of the room. Yeah. And this was the rule, not so much the exception. They weren't all huge narrative or representative scenes, but it's always well worth looking up when you go in a room. Well, almost always. This is probably the most boring ceiling that we will see today. However, in the Gold Ballroom, I'm sure you can't figure out why it was called the Gold Ballroom. At this point, this is probably all gold paint. Originally, it was not gold paint. Originally, all of this mess was gold leaf, right? So when I say that the sheer opulence is impressive, this is what I mean. This room doesn't move me. It doesn't make me feel things, except that, wow, someone had a lot of money. And also, why are there not dances in this room that is clearly meant for dancing? Why are there not dances in this room every weekend? Come on, people. It's meant to be used. Also meant to show status, but whatever. Also, I would like to point out that if you're thinking of going to the Hermitage, it is absolutely worth it, if you're able, to pay a little bit extra and get an early access pass or tour. We were some of the first people in the Hermitage, and that is the only reason you have this big, beautiful, clear shot of this room. 30 minutes later, just be full of people. And that can be impressive too, but it doesn't give you the same feeling for what the space is like. So, one of the other things that my dear spouse mentioned is that, like I said, the Hermitage and the Louvre are similar in scale. Both huge, both full of priceless works of art, both extremely impressive buildings, extremely historic buildings, but they have a rather different approach to conserving and curating or caring for their art. At the Louvre, there's things are arranged kind of much more thoughtfully. For the most part, there's still galleries where it was clear that they just kind of had to throw things on walls, puzzle piece wise, just to get things in there. But there's very much an awareness of this is something precious. This is something we need to take care of. Hey, Crafty, thank you for joining me. Yay! You're just in time to see the precious piece of art being moved by, just through the crowds. Through the crowds in the museum, not, hey, clear the way, or we're going to make sure and move this large, cumbersome painting. Apparently this is how they roll in St. Petersburg. You just kind of pull the artwork through the crowds to where it's going to go. And what's not pictured here were the multiple galleries that had open exterior windows. Just letting the air circulate. Which, I suppose wasn't so bad. It wasn't raining outside that day, but I can't imagine that those kinds of changes in temperature or humidity are particularly good for the more delicate pieces. I don't know. When my spouse saw that the first time he was there, he was really taken aback. Because you don't see that in the Louvre. You don't see the kind of, fresh air for the paintings. But I am not an art, I'm not an art major, I'm not an art conservator. For all I know, there's paintings need to breathe, and there's very good wisdom behind that. I don't know. It just seemed like they were substantially more cavalier in St. Petersburg. So it was interesting to see. So I don't think this is actually the throne room, but it is certainly a room with a throne in it. And I enjoyed the richness of the reds here. And I also kind of was a little bit befuddled. So I feel if I were the Tsarina of all the Russias, and I were building a throne room for myself, I think I would want to construct something that didn't make my throne look lost in the midst of all the wall decor and portrait behind me, and something in a nook that really made my throne look bigger rather than just kind of like a kid's chair. But I'm not the Tsarina of all the Russias, and they did not ask me about the construction of this room. So we have a very small looking little throne in this lovely large niche. But look at the floor. In a lot of ways, I found the woodwork, the inlaid wood work of the floors, to be way more impressive than some of the more overtly opulent wall decorations or gold trim, gold leaf. I love the various colors of wood used to make the designs in the floor. It feels warm and luxurious without feeling like forced opulence. It's clearly still a big deal, still status symbol, still a lot of money required for that, but I liked it better. So this is the actual throne room. St. George's Hall. Now again, also a ballroom. So you can see plenty of open space, nice floors for dancing. Yeah, Crafty. It's very grand. Plenty of chandeliers, so even if you're using candles, you'll still have light to see by, and you don't have to tread on your partner's feet unless you want to. And you can see the throne all the way at the end of the room, and its little red canopy. With, being that it's St. George's Hall, a relief of St. George killing the dragon right over it. And I don't think St. George was any of the Tsar's proper patron saints, but he's certainly a dramatic military figure if you're looking for that sort of thing to guard your throne room, guard your reign, be representative of your own pious military prowess. So, St. George's Hall with St. George. And then, like I said, so this is a detail of the flooring we just saw in St. George's Hall. And it's so pretty. It's so pretty. Our guide didn't tell us, and I didn't think to look up what all of these woods are, but there's such a wide range of shading here, from the extremely bright white flower in the center to some of these super dark leaves right here. I feel like we must be running the full gamut. We must have some ebony in there, must have some extremely light woods. Maybe, I don't know what kind of wood gets that light. Wood. Okay, I'm talking about wood. I'm done now. Back to the inlays. So this is the kind of thing we saw on the floors all over. Just super beautiful. And this room in particular really, really made me wish that there was music. It made me wish that I could be there for a dance. Because you could tell that the floor was meant to be danced on. It was beautiful and smooth, and the wood would be kind to dancing feet, and it really made me wish that I could, dress up in my foofy dress and go to the ball. But no such luck. So again, and I promise this is the last of the look at the floor, no really look at the floor photos in here. This is in a different room. But again, I couldn't get over how detailed and how intricate this one in particular was. The vines, the petals, the line work, yeah, exactly, Crafty. It's, so even though visually to me, the woodwork doesn't come across as quite as obnoxiously opulent as all the golden columns or the painting on the ceiling or whatever. In some ways, it's even more of a of a, look at how much money we have to throw around. Even the things that we're going to walk on are beautiful. Even the floors that we are just going to dance on and probably scuff up with ladies' high heels, or dudes' high heels, depending on which one. We can afford to hire master craftsfolk and buy all the expensive wood and spend probably more time. Yeah, it's a good point. This would take more time and more effort than just slapping some gold leaf on the columns. So everything about this definitely screamed, look at how prosperous, look at how powerful, look at how wealthy we are. And I wasn't crazy about that, but it was impressive. And then there were things like this. Not a whole room size thing, just this little inlaid, this is not painted, this is inlaid, stone table, inlaid with various stones to create this picture. This is Apollo in the center with the emblems of the 9 muses surrounding him. Yeah, crafty. It's ridiculous. And there were other tables almost, about as intricate as this one, kind of scattered throughout. And they're one of those things that just kind of leaves you a little bit awestruck. In the, how the fuck did this happen? How did they do this? I don't understand. I don't know. And a little bit befuddled, honestly. Like, this is cool and this is pretty and all, but there's appreciating having form with your function, a beautiful form with your function, and then there's taking it to kind of ridiculous levels. And to me, this verges a little bit on the ridiculous. Because if I want a table, I want to be able to set things on it and not worry about destroying the priceless artwork. I'd rather have the priceless artwork on a wall or in some way displayed where I don't have to worry about messing it up in the course of my everyday existence. But again, I'm not the Tsarina of all the rushes. So, I told you we were done with floors. I'm pretty sure that's true, but these are doors, all right? Doors. And these inlays were done in such a way that you can see the design, the same design from both sides. It goes all the way through the door. So you see a mirror image, just like you were seeing it, the same image, but from the other side, if you were on the other side of the doors. That design, that inlay goes all the way through. And I don't remember what material this is made of. It's, as you can see, it's this gorgeous reddish purpley color. I don't remember what kind of wood it is, or if it's stained, or what they did to it, how that happened. But it was gorgeous. And I particularly liked it, not just for the intricate detail and the beautiful colors, but also these two figures up here. On the right, the door to the right is Minerva, or Athena. And then I didn't have enough time to stand and stare at this door like I wanted to. So I'm not entirely sure who the figure on the left side is, but there seems to be a lot of ivy, and he's got one hand raised, like looks kind of like he's holding a cup. So I'm gonna go with Dionysus because that's me. So I also think that choice is interesting. Because Minerva, or Athena, and Dionysus are not a pairing you generally see. Like, not fully, but in some ways Athena is kind of antithetical to Dionysus. Athena is doing things decently and in order, and she's civilized. And, ooh. It's a good question, Crafty. I don't remember. So, next time I travel, I'm going to carry a little moleskin notebook and a pen so that I can make notes as I'm running around places. Because I made so many mental notes and I remember none of them. Like, none of them. And I didn't think to look that up. So I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was between one gallery and the other, but I might be wrong. I like your theory better, though. Someplace where they do official proper stuff during the day and party all night. Clearly, it should be a receiving room for official visitors during the day, or or better yet, should be a women's room where they work on their crafts and fiber craft during the day, and then they party all night. I like that. I'm going to go with that. That is my headcanon for this door now. Thank you. So, speaking of Grecian and classical things, there were a lot of Greek and Roman antiquities in the Hermitage. And my spouse did not think to mention this. He was emphasizing the columns and the tables and the this and the that and the other, and didn't think to mention to his wife, who is me, that, oh no, honey, there are Greek and Roman antiquities, you'll really like this. But clearly there were. This huge mosaic. Huge. You can see people, it is incredible crafty, and you can see people standing behind it. It gives you some idea of the scale of this thing. We've got a Gorgon head in the center, so Medusa-ish head in the center, which to me makes this feel very much like a mosaic that is also a shield, because you'll often see Gorgon heads on either Athena's breastplate or Athena's shield, because that's where Medusa's head went after Perseus brought it back to her. So, and this is wild speculation, it might not be, but it feels like this also serves a protective purpose. And, just saying, Matricula's not here, to see the centaurs. That's okay. That's all right. But there are pictures, all the way around here. It's kind of a battle montage of human versus centaur. We will, Crafty. We will mock her mercilessly later, in the Discord and elsewhere. And then a border of fruits and flowers, and you can't really see it here, but in the border section there are faces built into the fruits and flowers and chalices, and it's very complex, and there's a lot going on here, and I don't really have a theory about kind of what ties that all together, except I don't know, maybe someone just also in the farthest out level there are a whole bunch of sea monsters, sea serpents, dragons, etc. So there are a lot of rings, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of kinds of critters. And this was a floor mosaic. Again, something that people would have walked on in the place that it was originally installed, which is just kind of mind-blowing to me. But yeah, there were so many Greek and Roman antiquities, and I had such a good time with them. But we are not seeing most of those today, because again, as I was going through my photos, it's like, there are too many of these for a single stream. Let me make a folder for Dionysus, let me make a folder for Persephone, let me make a folder for Ganymede. So we'll be seeing many more of the pieces from this museum in more focused storytelling streams later. So it's always nice to have some visual aids for your actual stories. So this was the one piece of the interiors, the Hermitage interiors, that really kind of struck me. This passage was, I don't know if it was built or just decorated in Catherine the Great's time, but it was it definitely became what it was during her reign. And during this time, the Hermitage was the royal residence, the Winter Palace was the royal residence, and it wasn't open to the public. The growing collection of art here was not open for public display, and Catherine kind of liked it that way. She was known for saying that she could walk in here for days if she wanted to and see no one else but the mice. And that they were the only ones, she and the mice were the only ones who would enjoy this beauty. We didn't have anything like enough time in this passage. As you can see, there's a stupid amount of detail here. And I couldn't even bring myself to ask my spouse to take pictures of any of the particular details because I just couldn't choose. There was just too much. You're exactly right, Crafty. It's really incredible, and it's one of those things I couldn't pick. I couldn't pick apart to say, oh yes, zoom in on this, or oh yes, get this portion. It was just too much. I could have spent, half an hour at least in this passage alone, but we didn't have that kind of time. It's deeply unfortunate. So, yeah, alone with the mice. I would have befriended the mice. It would have been great. So last week, when we were looking at St. Isaac's with the huge columns, and then the huge malachite and lapis lazuli columns, I said that we'd be seeing some big-ass vases made of precious stones and such today. And here you are. This one is not the most precious vase. We'll see a few others a little later, but this one is certainly the largest and most impressive. This is also something I don't understand, like why you would commission a vessel this big and this heavy. You can see, actual humans for scale kind of in the background. Very big. It's like you can see, you see this this bust over here against the wall. There were a few other little kind of smaller pieces around the edge of the room, but this was the only thing in the center. The only thing. Ginormous. If you're going to bathe in champagne, you might as well have a fancy bathtub. You could bathe in this, but you would need a ladder to get up and into it, which I'm sure wouldn't be a problem. If you're bathing in champagne, you've already got a good handle on logistics in the first place. Still. So this is the biggest vase, or vessel. And I think this is just granite, as opposed to the one we see here in this gallery, which is a large, again, you can see actual person for scale down here, walking right by it. This one is in fact made of lapis lazuli. So, stupid big, precious vase. This room and the next room were there were a lot of gallery rooms with a lot of all kinds of different stuff in it, and some of them were pretty well classified. Some rooms were just antiquities and some rooms were just paintings, but you'd kind of have rooms where it seemed like oh, this stuff needs a place, chuck it in there. And some of the paintings are labeled and some of them aren't, and there was a lot. There was a lot going on. You can see that it's worthwhile to look up in this gallery as well. It's a pretty pastel ceiling design, which this is a separate gallery, but very much in the same style. So you can see a little bit more of the skylight to let some natural light in, let you see what you're looking at. Although obviously there are chandeliers and candles as well, which I'm sure that the smoke was really good for the paintings back in the old days, for sure. And again, both in the foreground and further back, you can see 2 green vases, and both of those are malachite. Kind of ridiculous, kind of amazing, just a lot going on there. You also can't really see it, but part of the ceiling design were what to me looked like some tentacular angels, like angels with wings from here up devolving into petals or tentacles from the waist down. And that was kind of strange to me. Right? I mean, they were more petals than tentacles, but I don't know. Still felt a little bit Lovecraftian. Yeah, I don't know why you need a vase that big, except to say that you can. Except to say that I was able to afford this. So, in addition to needing redamdiculous sized vases, you also, if you are the Tsar or Tsarina of all the Russias, need redamdiculous clocks. Because why would you have a normal, boring clock when you can have a clock face like this big, that big clock face nested in a huge clockwork monstrosity with a clockwork peacock and rooster, and there's a third bird in there, but I don't remember what it is. So this is the clock room. And this thing here in the glass case with the peacock on the gold tree is a clock. And when it strikes the hour, the peacock moves. I believe the rooster moves. Yeah, crafty. I would have loved to see that too. We did not catch it on the hour or on an hour. So we did not get to see it in motion, but it was still pretty impressive. Just still. And I found it particularly impressive that for a clock, you really have to look. You really have to kind of search it to find the clock face. It is not obvious. Yeah. And then while we're on the theme, I mean, clearly not every clock, even if you're Catherine the Great, not every clock can be a animatronic clockwork masterpiece, right? You need some smaller ones, some simpler ones, some easier to use ones. But clearly the little clock face should still be secondary to the gold detailing here. We should still get some interesting figures, really class up the joint. No boring clocks, no. So there was this one. And then, if you really have to be practical, if the clock face really has to be the most prominent thing about the clock, you should still have some. Oh, good, crafty! Yay! Would you post that in my channel in the mini Discord, the We All Shine channel? I would appreciate that. Yay! Thank you. But yeah, you should clearly have still have some reclining figures, even if they aren't all gold. And then, of course, picture of the clock, but also I would like to draw your attention to the infants on sea monsters in the little panels below the clock. Because those are some pretty high quality goat, dragon, sea monster critters. And it's these little details that really make the room, of course. Yeah, babies love sea monsters. Give that baby a sea monster. And, I mean, babies like to cry and rampage and cause destruction and completely befuddle rules of logic. So yeah, they would get along really well with sea monsters, I feel. So we can't go to the Hermitage without looking at some proper art qua art. And I had several of, a couple. Had a couple of pieces of representations of Mary Magdalene, and I don't have any particular aspirations of doing a Mary Magdalene-centric stream, so I figured I'd include those as your representative fine art pieces. So this one is, both of the ones we're going to see are the repentant or penitent Mary Magdalene, because we don't, for some reason, we never get to see the unrepentant, in her heyday, Mary Magdalene, which I, for one, would love to see represented more. That's just me. So this one is by an Italian painter whose name I didn't recognize, but I would draw your attention, if it's not there already, to the strategically flowing hair. Because, like we talked about in the Rouen stream, there would be riots in the streets if men got to see Mary Magdalene in her heyday. That is extremely true. And yet, it is still something I want. But you have a fine point, Crafty. Fine point. We talked during the Rouen stream about how Saint Mary of Egypt got conflated with Saint Mary Magdalene, and there came to be this folklore around Mary Magdalene that she went off into the desert to live alone and pray and be repentant and such. Because Saint Mary of Egypt was known for living in the desert. And once her clothes deteriorated, her hair grew profusely, either from her head or just all over her body, to maintain her modesty. So here we see Saint Mary Magdalene of Egypt with her hair trying very hard to grow and cover enough to preserve her repentant modesty, but it's just failing. She may be repentant, but there's only so much you can do. Those tits will not be contained. So we have this one in which we want Mary Magdalene to be repentant. We don't want her to still be a sinner, but we don't want her too repentant or too reformed, because that would be less fun to look at. As opposed to this one. And really, this Mary Magdalene looks much more repentant to me, right? She's got her skull, her reminder of mortality. She's got long hair, right? But it's not it's not doing the work here, right? It's pulled back. She's not concerned about it. She's not overly clothed, because we couldn't have that, but clothed in appropriately simple and raggedy attire that might slip at any time. And rather than looking very serene and prayerful, she's deep in her repentance, in her solemnly feeling bad for whatever it is she did. And I really enjoyed the lines of the statue, of the sculpture. I like her hands. I love the outstretched hands. I love the closed eyes. I love that she's having an internal moment here, and we're just kind of on the outside. We're not really invited into this. And yeah, crafty. It is classical sculpture. We have to show some skin. What would we be doing? What would sculptors and sculptors even be doing if there wasn't skin to show? Who knows? But yes, really pretty, really striking. This was in a hall also with a couple of sculptures of Psyche from the myth of Eros and Psyche. And I know I kind of told that story in the Amsterdam stream, but having more really pretty representations of that story and of those characters makes me want to go back and do a fuller version. So I might do that too. And then finally, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do this stream. I couldn't take y'all through the Hermitage without showing you at least one straight up Grecian artifact, antiquity. So this is a large Anphora with scenes from Hades on it. So at the top here, we start in Tartarus, which is the actually hellish part of Hades, right? It's where your actual sinners and actual evildoers go. Not just your normal people who've died, but your actual evildoers, your kinslayers, your probably your suicides, because problematic. But your people who have seriously offended the gods, your major evildoers, go to Tartarus, where they get very, very, very creative punishments. And up here, you see Ixion tied to his wheel, which it may not be readily obvious, but the wheel is ringed in fire. It is a fiery wheel that he is tied to for all eternity, because he tossed his dad into a pit of fire, so now he burns on a fiery wheel in Tartarus. So that's where we're starting, up top. In the middle here, we've got, crafty. I mean, the punishment often really fits the crime in Greek mythology, or at least bears some useful relationship to it. And that usually makes it fairly gruesome. But in the middle here, the very middle figure between those four columns is Hades, So, Lord of the Realm. Then on his left is Persephone, Queen of the Dead, in her role as Queen of Hades, Queen of Erebos. And just for the record, in some mythological sources, Persephone is the one you really have to convince if you want something done in the land of the dead. Persephone is the one you have to convince, and Persephone is the one you have to be scared of. She, more than her husband, is the arbiter of justice. She's the one that can make or break you in the land of the dead. And it earned her the title of the Iron Queen of Hades, or the Iron Queen of Erebos. Yeah, it's not an aspect of her, Crafty, that gets talked about a whole lot. But there are definitely hymns in which she's referred to as Dread Persephone. One of her epithets, her names, is Praxidike. Arbiter, so the giver of justice. And you don't get that in Dolaires. No shade. Dolaires is lovely starting point. Good starting point. Excellent semi-coloring book for small mythologically inclined children. But they won't give you that. But then to the right of Hades is Hermes, mostly naked, like he likes to be, with his caduceus, because Hermes is the one who gets you to Hades. He's the psychopomp. He's your guide, because he's the messenger, right? And we've talked about this. Maybe I've talked about this in other contexts. Most gods don't go to Hades. Some gods can't really go to Hades. Like, when, we'll talk about this more in the Persephone stream at some point, but when Demeter was looking for Persephone, when she was searching for Persephone, even if she'd known that Persephone was in Hades, she couldn't have gone there. Even when she found out that Persephone was in Hades, she couldn't go there, because she's the goddess of grain, of life, of vegetable fecundity, right? The things that grow out of the earth, the things that yield and produce. And she just has no power or access to the land of the dead. So, it wasn't Demeter that went to go get her daughter. It was, in most versions, Hermes, or sometimes Hecate, who's also a very liminal space. Yeah, Crafty, yes, exactly. Hermes is the one who guides you to Hades, if you're immortal. And he's the one that gets you to the river, gets you to the boat, and then Charon takes it from there. If you've read American Gods, have you read American Gods? I'm not going to go any further on that, unless you say you have. Yeah. Hermes has a very Grim Reaper-ish role, but it's obviously not all he is. You know, he's about transitions and communication, and so okay, cool. So Mr. Ibis, Thoth, was heavily syncretized with Hermes when the Greeks got to Egypt, and we had the Ptolemaic dynasties. So which makes sense because they're both very clever gods. Hermes is not nearly as bookish as Thoth is, and that's fine. But they're both clever, sleight of hand, magical, powerful, and they lead you where you're going to go when you die. Because they have that kind of cross realm access. So yeah. So this is kind of the court of Hades. And I'm not really sure who's surrounding it. Might be other minor divinities, might be dead souls. I couldn't look enough. It was on display this direction in its case. I couldn't go around it. But then at the bottom here are what appear to be reveling women with amphoras, jugs of possibly wine, garlands in their hands and in their hair. And I'm not really sure if this has significance, if this is kind of portrayal of the blessed dead, the ones who get to go to the Elysian fields, the ones who get to keep who they are in the afterlife, or if this is just that the artist had extra space, and who doesn't like partying ladies? I mean, really. But I really enjoyed this piece because there was so much going on and a lot that you don't kind of normally see together. Tartarus isn't a usual subject comparatively, nor, for understandable reasons, is Hades one of the most widely represented gods. So it was unusual. It really stood out to me, and I really enjoyed and appreciated it. So like I said, there was a lot more. There was a lot more in the museum. I saw a lot more. I had feelings and thoughts about a lot more than I showed here today. But this seemed like enough to be going on with.